From parts unknown, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. This is Paul's Pier 6 Brawl, a member of the Wrestle Launch Network. It's been a while since I've been on. I just wanted to take a moment, first off, right off the bat, say a big thank you to Angel and Jim for doing what they do each and every week. I had a death in the family and some other stuff that popped up afterwards that's kind of kept me occupied otherwise. So I apologize to them for not being around and being able to join the show. I really missed it. Was lucky I got to pop in the other night for the latest version. So all three of us for a brief moment there. But I am back with my own segment, the Pier 6 Brawl. Most of this is going to be a little bit dated, but it's stuff that during my absence I jotted down and was wanting to talk about briefly before we move on to new and bigger and better things. So first of all, obviously, not enough people or not the right people watched my very first video that I did about a month ago, where we talked about being a fan versus being a fanatic. And those people that did not watch apparently all went to Wrestlemania. Because there were several incidents over Wrestlemania weekend. I guess I should say Wrestlemania week now, because it's basically a week-long build-up to the actual show. One of the first incidents that was reported was from one of the conventions surrounding the Vegas area, where the formerly known as Cora Jade in WWE, excuse me, I'm blanking on her name now. I believe she's in TNA. She accused a fan of touching her inappropriately during an interaction. And I mean, how creepy do you have to be to travel to Vegas from wherever you're from, pay to enter a convention, pay for the opportunity for an autograph or a picture with one of the wrestlers, and then do something completely stupid like touch them inappropriately? I mean, come on. I mean, I'm not gonna go what I want to go and say, you live in your mom's basement and you don't get out much or whatever. But you just, how do you function in society? How do you have a job? How do you interact with people on a normal basis if this is what you do during your leisure time? After that, it was, as things ramped up for Mania, the list just kept getting longer and longer and longer. There was an incident where Damian Priest, I believe, interjected himself to help someone else get out of a situation. There was Drew McIntyre had an issue with fans, and X-Pac was also part of that group that had an issue. Booker T even had one at the hotel where they were staying, where not only did the fan bother them, but the fan followed them into the freaking bathroom and was still filming as you're going into the bathroom. Again, how do you hold down a job? How do you act otherwise when you get around normal people? Or is it just when you see somebody you see on TV? And of course, the biggest incident of them all was post WrestleMania, where AJ Lee and Bailey were talking and having a moment in the hallway as they were walking through the hotel, and some idiot kept trying to shove a phone in their face, and they kept moving away from him to get away from him as they were talking, and then out of nowhere, there's video of this, of Punk stepping up and knocking the guy's phone out of his hand, which absolutely applaud him doing. I'm sure he would have done that for anybody, not just because it was his wife was one of the people the guy was shoving his phone in their faces. But it makes no sense. Makes absolute no sense that you act this way in public. There's no place for it. And this is the kind of people that got to go to WrestleMania, where fans like myself, who I've never been to one, unfortunately. I've been to almost everything else that you can imagine. But WrestleMania is my bucket list thing that I have not been able to do. And with the current administration jacking prices on everything, I probably will not ever get to do, unfortunately. Those are the kind of people that show up, and the real fans are getting shut out and can enjoy themselves and act like civilized people. I know when you're in a situation and you're in public and you see someone that's famous or you're a fan of, nowadays that's the instant reaction is grab your phone or go talk to them or bother them. This is the bigger issue, is the hotel where the folks were staying at. And this was a point that I read a great article from PW Insider by Mike Johnson, who was talking about, why there was not more security for the wrestlers. Why were so many of these incidents happening? Because in the past at WrestleManias or big events, fans couldn't get into the hotel. They couldn't get to the wrestlers. There's probably some people that were on the same floor as some of these people and didn't realize it. Some probably did, unfortunately. But, there used to be a hotel that was locked down. I believe in his example, Jim Cornette said that, you couldn't even get on the floor of a hotel where the talent was staying, because they had security there. They had you had to have credentials to get onto that floor. So it's amazing that TKO and all the money that those gentlemen are making and that company is making, that they could not hire more security or could not somehow block off a floor of rooms for the talent. I know it's an awful lot, and you're dealing with Vegas where there's just hotels everywhere, and you want to keep them as central as possible, because they have media obligations, they have the WWE World or other conventions that they're part of. So you want to keep them as central as possible. You don't want to spread them out across the city like that. But geez Louise, hire some security to help them get through, especially when you're in Vegas, where it's not just a hotel, it's a casino, and you got to go through the casino some places to actually get to the damn hotel part. It's just makes no sense, you know. But this is the talent's job, folks, and you know you you wouldn't jump the rail and go when somebody's in the ring doing a promo and go, hey, when you're done, could you come over here and take a picture with me? Yeah, no, you wouldn't. You'd get thrown out. So I know people lose their cool in that moment when they see something, but you gotta kind of remember that this is their job. This is what they're doing. They're probably trying to get to or from someplace, trying to get to a media obligation, trying to get to WWE World or whatever convention they were part of, and to go and sign for folks that paid for that experience. Now, that's another thing in itself. I mean, there was someone on an article on Fightful Select that said that, there was a source that thought that the pricing out of fans from some of these photo ops and autograph opportunities could be exasperating the situation, making it worse because the prices were so high in the hundreds of dollars for WWE World for people that, you're pricing out again, like you are fans that want to go to the show, you're pricing them out of getting that experience. And so when the talent sees them in the wild, in the real world, they freak out and start bothering them. And they may be on a time crunch. They may be, only have a few minutes to themselves to be alone before they have to go to the next event. It's not, they sometimes are going to say no. It's not worth bothering them. It's just, and then to get upset about it afterwards is even worse. Especially like the guy that got his phone knocked out of his hand by Punk. He went on later to say that, I'm not going to sue, but all I want is an apology. An apology for what, you son of a bitch? Whether you realize it or not, you were the one harassing other people. And he stepped up to stop it. And if you can't see that, then you're not a fan. You're a fanatic. So, moving on. I happened to come across during my time off a video on YouTube of the Ariel Helwani interview with the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Now, truth be told, I'm a huge Ric Flair fan. Ric Flair is one of the two people that I credit with making me a fan of this form of entertainment. The other was my grandfather. My grandfather had cable before my home did when I was growing up. And when we would go over and visit on Saturdays and Sundays at 6:05, you knew where you would find my grandfather. He would be on his couch with his bag of bugles watching WTBS Superstation out of Atlanta and Georgia Championship Wrestling. He was my introduction to wrestling. And then once I saw Ric Flair, I was hooked. So I've watched ever since. I've followed the man's career for a long time. And unfortunately, since the time that Rick retired, he's just been one thing after another of embarrassing himself, embarrassing others, maybe. Just doing things that just don't make any sense. The drunken cameos, the drunken exploits at restaurants, and just it just and making up things that aren't real. And I don't know if it's a thing of him trying to cling to his relevancy, or that he is, he is just as popular as Hulk Hogan when you talk about professional wrestling from when it was in its boom, went national. But I heard about the video from Stevie Richards' channel, where he was taking shots at Stevie Richards and his host and Dutch Mantel for their podcasts. But then he goes on this interview with the MMA Hour and just totally buries them, or acts like he didn't know Dutch, which he's wrestled Dutch in the past. I know he probably didn't have a lot of interactions with Stevie Richards, but I mean, there was just so many stories and so many things that he mentioned on the show that were just crazy. One of them was he mentioned that he claimed that Dennis Rodman, who was going into the Hall of Fame the WrestleMania weekend, wanted him to induct him into the Hall of Fame. And when Dennis supposedly called him and asked him, he said, "Sure, I'll get on it." Called WWE, left a message with people, and I never got a call back. They didn't want me. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. And then he launched into the whole thing from the WrestleMania the year before, where the whole build up to WrestleMania, the whole issue between Tiffany Stratton and Charlotte, the one promo that got a little too real, got a little out of control when Tiffy brought up the divorces of Charlotte. And then Charlotte tried to, panicked and tried to insinuate that Tiffany's boyfriend at the time was in her DMs. Ludwig had nothing to do with any of this. It was something that Charlotte tried to get back some heat, which the heat she was getting at that time was go away heat, because nobody wanted her to win that Mania or Royal Rumble and go to Mania and face Tiffany. But he then launched into a story that he could get anybody's phone number at any time, and he just talked to Donald Trump, and he could call this person and that person and Mark Wahlberg, and he can get anybody's number. So he got Ludwig's number, and he called him, and he told him when he saw him, he was going to kick his ass. I understand him being protective of his daughter, but being a worker himself in the business, he should have known that the business is a work. It might have been partly a shoot that, that Tiffany said that. I don't know. But I understand him being wanting to be protective, but you don't supposedly call up the guy who had nothing to do with the segment and then threaten to kick his ass. You're 70 some years old, sir. I'm pretty sure that wouldn't happen. But he then claimed that Ludwig went running like a bitch, quote, to Hunter and complained and got him banned from Wrestlemania this year as well. No, sir. Somebody should have given you a courtesy call back, maybe. But you got to remember that technically, somehow, some way, you are still under contract with AEW, and that would cause an issue with you appearing on a WWF program that would be broadcast. And that's why you weren't allowed to induct Dennis Rodman. You could have gone to Mania probably if you'd have made some phone calls, but you didn't. And you wouldn't have been featured, and you'd have been upset about that, and you'd have been back on the Roots of Fight argument that the WWE is trying to destroy your legacy and all this other nonsense. They're not doing that. You're a contracted talent with AEW, and it would take a lot. It's been done in the past, but it would have taken a lot of negotiations to get that to happen. I stopped watching that hour-long video at that point because it was embarrassing to me as a fan to sit there and say, I'm a fan of this gentleman. So I have to clarify, I guess, that I'm a fan of the man that was the worker, the man that I watched all those years ago when I watched Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then all through his career to the WWE, even TNA. I was a fan of his work. I wish he would understand that his legacy is that part of it, not what he's doing now. That's why people pay hundreds of dollars for a cameo, but then get disappointed because you're a drunken mess when you do it, or you're reading things straight off the card that they sent, the information of what they would like for you to say, instead of you just being you and doing that. You're one of the greatest talkers in this business. Why can't you let that part of the personality out and not the rest? It's just a shame to see what he's become these last several years. Quickly, the one thing I'm going to say about Wrestlemania itself, the actual show, I told it was like two different groups of people booked that show. Night one was one group, and night two was another. Night one was garbage. Night two was so much better. There was, obviously the finish of the main event, but still it was a hell of a match, and I got to give it to him. I wasn't ready to see Roman be champ again, but we'll see where it goes. So, again, ashamed of what I did. I was brainwashed by the constant barrage of ads from Netflix, of the Hulk Hogan documentary that were a 4-part documentary that they had come out on the 22nd, right after Wrestlemania. I had some quiet moments where I was not helping out with my father. As some of you know from the show, if you listen to the show yet from this week, my father has very late stage dementia, and I'm here being a caretaker to him. So sometimes a lot of my time is taken up with him. But I had the quiet moment where there was nothing going on, and I was finding nothing interesting to watch on YouTube, so I succumbed to the brainwashing of the ads and watched the Hogan docu-series on Netflix. This was hyped as the final interview he ever did before his passing. And in even one of the clips, he makes the claim that he knows where all the bodies are buried, brother. And I watched this thing, and you know, when I watch a documentary, which I watch many sometimes, it's because of several things. It's something that, obviously, it's something that interests me. It's maybe sometimes nostalgia. Maybe it's also, when I'm watching, I'm looking for something new. I'm looking to learn something new, get a different perspective. You know, maybe something that I didn't know. And especially with wrestling, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that makes some of these documentaries pretty, good and worth watching. And I'm going to save you some time. Don't watch it if you haven't already. I learned absolutely nothing new from watching this documentary. It was neat, the nostalgia part, going back, because again, I'm a very older gentleman now, and I was there during the birth of Hulkamania as a child. So I watched all of that, and it was nice to see some of the old footage, see some of the people talking about, him when he first started, interspersed within there. But again, there was nothing new. I didn't learn anything new about him that I didn't already know, or that he didn't make up, because anything about Hogan, every time he tells a story, it gets bigger and bigger, and something else happened that didn't happen. And it's kind of like Flair in a way. I know one of the stories Stevie touched on about Flair was, Flair claims that he was in Puerto Rico when Bruiser Brody was killed, and he was not. And it's been proven he's not. He was on a wrestling card somewhere in the United States when that happened. So Hogan's kind of the same way. Every time he tells a story, it's a new telling, new way, new lie. There was so much that they glossed over. They touched on the steroid trial very little. They, of course, talked about the Gawker media trial, and him suing them into oblivion. But did very little about the whole reason that he ended up suing Gawker, by having the inappropriate tape that was leaked. Nothing about that. Nothing about the even more after the trial was over, where the whole racial slur part of the tape was transcribed and put out into the world. Um, you know, didn't touch any of that. Um, totally left out. Ugh, seeing Linda Hogan all over this thing was ridiculous. Um, I was very proud of the fact that Brooke Hogan didn't take the bait and stayed out of it, which she's stayed out of pretty much everything to do with him for ever since his death or right before his death. So nothing about his other ex-wives, but Linda was first, and front and up in front and in your face every couple segments, and then his last wife was in there featured a little bit. Again from his career, his they covered him going to WCW and what caused him to leave and all this stuff, and they swooped by the Bash at the Beach, which that's something right there that could have been interesting, because I don't think that we've ever seen him or had an interview with him about that day. We've heard others. We've heard Eric Bischoff's. We've heard from Vinny Rubro, but I don't. Jeff Jarrett, I think, has said some things about it, but I don't think we've ever had any kind of public statement or explanation of that day from Hogan. But then again, would we have gotten, even if he had, I guess, would we have even gotten the real truth behind that day, or his perspective of that day? And would his perspective of that day have been skewed as hell? Who knows? So, nostalgia hit a little bit for seeing some of that stuff that I from when I was a kid, and even the other stuff because I lived through the NWO era. But it didn't hit on anything else for me. So if you haven't watched it, don't go out of your way unless you're totally bored and want to put yourself to sleep, I guess, maybe. I don't know if that works for you. So I think, we're into a post-Wrestlemania, and some new directions. Looks like we're definitely getting Roman Reigns and Jacob Fatu, which was, I thought, interesting, even though it appears that they're kind of retreading the bloodline storyline a little bit by getting the Usos back aligned with Roman. Not a fan of that, but I was shocked when Jacob stepped up. That was a neat wrinkle into the story. And then Jacob's also having issues with Solo and the MFTs. So that's kind of neat that they're featuring Fatu, which is good. And that they're moving in a different direction. Speaking of different direction, we're as of last night, spoilers for those of you that haven't seen SmackDown, looks like Gunther and Cody at Backlash. Definitely looks like we're going to see long-term wise, maybe SummerSlam, seeing CM Punk and Cody Rhodes. So those are some new directions and some interesting things that we've got to look forward to. So other than that, I think I've rambled on long enough for today. hopefully I will be back on with the other two gentlemen for a full show sometime soon, and not just popping in like I did the other night. But like I said, my time is sometimes is taking care of my father is kind of important for me right now, because it's an unfortunate disease, and my thoughts, my heart goes out to anybody else that's been affected by this. So take care, and we will all see you very, very soon. Like, comment, subscribe. Have a good day. Have a good week till we see you again.